But now, what if you were to generalize from that? You might conclude that that what makes people happy is relative. Some people are like this. Some people are like that. Therefore, everything is relative. Austrian economics kind of talks about this. It says that that people have are view things as important based on relative needs. And so you might want a big house, but your neighbor who doesn't have very many things, is older, unable to walk upstairs, might want that one level house based on their needs or wants. And so what Austrian economics does is say, instead of variabilizing everything and trying to systematize everything, we realize that people make relative choices, but then from there we can then pull out and say, what are the base assumptions that we can make by not systematizing every intricate decision, saying, oh, well, if you were given the option to pay, $500 for a 10,000 square foot house, you would definitely take it. Well, except for those people that wouldn't use it. And so it moves a step back and say, okay, let's look at how people make those relative decisions. And so that's the difference between like Austrian economics and Keynesian economics. Here, most people are relativists and they live comfortably with that relativism. They apply it to everything. They say, oh, well, since people like chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream, well, then people that view murder as wrong and view it as just fine are probably just in the same boat. And we just kind of have to live and let live. Well, sadly, that is our culture. They believe that because people have different tastes, then our values are up for grabs just as a matter of whatever pleases you. And he's going to not make that point.
Exactly. So he's describing moral relativism, right? What may be right for you, morally speaking, may not be right for me, morally speaking, and vice versa. Because how do we get there? Well, because people have different tastes, right? Some like chocolate, some like vanilla. So I guess our values are the same way. Some like murder, some like, peace or whatever, right? So, and obviously that is not the proper way to we shouldn't draw that kind of, conclusion from just because people have different likes, right? But he's suggesting that's kind of the basis of the moral relativism that we see in our society. He says we also learn in physics and chemistry and other hard sciences that there are things that work together in a causal relationship. Right. In fact, he says before you got to school and systematized it, you learned about causal relationships at home. Right. When you put your hand on mom's hot stove, you realize I don't want to do that again. Right. That caused the pain. So hot stove is pain. So I won't do that again. And so he says we grow up and learn certain generalizations about the world. We talk about, he's talked about two of them for us, right? One is that the world operates in a cause and effect, law-like fashion, hot stove pain, right? The other is that everyone is different in some way, right? Some like chocolate, some like vanilla. And so when you ask, how do I bring these two principles together, he says, now we've started doing philosophy. Right? That's what his point is here.
Right. Well, maybe the stove is hot for you, but it's definitely not hot for me. But maybe you should try more, and then I'll see if the tests ring out, and then maybe I'll So important decisions are made based on your generalizations about the nature of reality, how you know what you know, and how you think you ought to live your life. And we ask these questions like, should we execute murderers? People will defend their answer by taking a step back and resting on their generalizations about the world or human nature or whatever it might be. They defend their view on very important issues by falling back to their philosophical assumptions. So talking about, well, I don't trust the state enough to pave a street. Why should I trust them to execute murderers? And then they might come to face that by saying, well, this murderer has murdered my sister. They're on camera doing it, and they're unrepentant, and they say they're going to do it again. Well, can I still take a step back and say, well, I don't trust the state enough to do this? And so you might come into conflict with that. And so we might have to reevaluate that generalization, or maybe even take a step further back. And so he's saying from these specific instances, we fall back and say, okay, how can I be, we might not have that full force consistency but we're going to look back and try and go back to our generalities to then apply out to the specific instances, like should we execute murders?
Yeah. And so, his next section then says, so what does it mean to do philosophy, right? He says, everyone does philosophy, but what does it mean to do philosophy? And he says there are two basic tasks of philosophy. The first one is that there is a critical task. The philosopher cross-examines people's opinions, right? And he says that's the critical task of philosophy. That's where philosophers, are analytical. They try to draw distinctions. They look for logical relationships. They try to get people to make sure that they have evidence for what they say. And, they're not being arbitrary and that sort of thing. So that's the analytical, critical portion of philosophy. That's the critical task of it, he says.
All right. So then he goes on to say, well, philosophy is not limited to the classroom. That's what we kind of think of, like, well, there's philosophers and they sit in their ivory towers and they have surrounded by books and they're unkempt hair and they're just writing. And then they have to go and enter out into the world just to teach their students in order to have food to eat. Well, you can't operate in the world without some view of reality, knowledge, and ethics. So reality, how the world is; knowledge, how we know things; and ethics, how we operate, how we exist, how we do things in the world. Everyone has this basic philosophy. The first task of philosophy, we said, is to critically examine people's assumptions to find reliable presuppositions about metaphysics, that's reality, epistemology, that's knowledge, and ethics, which is kind of the right and wrong, how we know those things, what are the right and wrong things, and the principles for that. These assumptions are the foundation of people's lives. I'm going to get a bus. Why do I wait for the doors to open? Because I believe that those doors are real. They exist. How do I know when to show up at 9:15 for that bus? Why am I confident that the clock that I read on my wrist or on my wall is there? And then also, should I pay the tab for to use the bus as well? Or the driver's looking down and doesn't notice me, so it's fine because he didn't see me. Those are all assumptions that we use. And guess what? You just got on a bus. Congratulations, you've done philosophy.
Yeah.
But if those are the foundations, we also need a roof, something that draws all these areas of life together into what we call a unified worldview.
Yeah, good. So we have the critical portion, the analytical portion, he says, is the foundation, asking these various questions about metaphysics, the study of the nature of reality, and ethics, the study of values, and epistemology, the study of knowledge. And so that's the foundation, he suggests, and we ask critical questions about those. But now, what about the roof that we put on the philosophical foundation, he says? And the roof, he says, is answering the question, what's it all about, right? Once we've done our study in literature and history and biology and, physics or whatever, someone must ask the question, what's it all about? How do we bring it all together is what he's getting at. How do we relate what we've learned in, for instance, political science class to what we learned in literature class to what we learned in psychology lab, experimenting with how, for instance, rats react to stimuli, right? How do we relate all that stuff? How do we bring it together? And so he's suggesting here that's the second major task of philosophy.
Right.